we are, the ReThink podcast, way in over our head.
We didn't even started.
Let's admit that to begin with.
Yeah.
Ben's got it all figured out for us.
Ben's got it figured out. We're going to let him do
What a
all the talking and get himself deep
in trouble.
Hey, but the good news is
You're back.
Paradise was awesome.
So
but
let's
God sent me
recap.
back.
Let's do a recap.
There's more work to be done.
Speaking of
None of
our
the
heads,
three of us, Matt, Ben, and myself, we don't hold to a tribulation rapture where the church gets pulled out.
I did not know where you were going.
Me neither.
The church gets pulled out and we stay left behind.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, I did read Left
But I
Behind.
got the wondering last week, and we talked about that in our podcast opener,
Yeah.
that maybe we were left behind.
Let's just say heaven is for real.
Blunker got
But I
raptured
already had to
out.
pay $60 for a pound of coffee.
It was 80.
Holy-
It was worth it.
Does that not
80
sound
bucks
like
for a
heaven?
pound of coffee?
I'm not sharing with you guys. Sorry.
Did you buy some?
Yeah, I bought 1 pound because they talked me into it. They're a smooth talker. I went on the coffee tour. They let me try way
There
too many
was-
samples.
There was a guy from Turkey
I was-
in Hawaii.
I make a good deal.
Very good
It's
deal.
like a custom tailored suit
Yeah,
or
the
a
guy
pound of coffee.
the
Was
guy-
that
yeah,
fake?
I'll take both.
Was that fake, genuine coffee?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Okay.
genuine fake.
the
Genuine
guy
fake
that sold
coffee.
you the suit.
Gold
in
coffee
Turkey.
beans.
Yeah. So
So here's what I would do and ruin that. Because it's so expensive, I'd make the coffee super weak to stretch it out. And every
Yeah.
pot would be horrible. But I'd
Are you
drink
hiding?
for a
Are you
year.
hiding that coffee from like everyone in your family?
I let my parents try a cup of it yesterday.
What cup?
Humble.
So we made a pot of it.
Mm.
We figured it out. It's about $12 a pot.
Wow.
Oh,
Is it just like another level though?
It is very smooth.
It's another level.
It is another level. I would not spend that money on another pound. Let's
Yeah.
just say that. But it's good.
I've hung out with Farley enough to know sometimes you just do things. Just say you've done them.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the way you
It's the
live your life.
experience.
Yeah.
I
It's
agree.
the experience. That
But
is.
when it's
that's
all
it.
said and done, we are glad that you're back because we know we weren't left behind.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe someday
And the shot
there's
was
a-
just off
not
balance.
because
That's the
we-
main
Someday
reason.
is there a chance we three get to go to paradise?
Yeah, I mean,
probably
just
not.
say
Yeah, probably
actually
not.
get the Southwest rewards card.
Yeah, we stayed
and,
here and
get
you
all
know,
those points.
did the work of ministry, but
Yeah, whatever.
somebody's got to enjoy.
Yeah, I
it.
mean,
Somebody's
you
gotta
know,
do it.
I met with a few pastors there, and
Sure.
two
Nice.
churches. Two
Tax
churches are really.
randomly at the luau.
Tax write-off. Hey, come over here, bellboy.
I couldn't afford a bellboy.
Pretty expensive.
I was
overall,
carrying
right?
my own bags everywhere.
The
Is
whole,
it like
the whole thing's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
it's
So
like you get to the hotel and you're like, I'll hold on to my bags.
oh yeah, even to the point of I was like, hey Mandy, let's walk to Diamond Head to hike
It's
it
9 miles.
because parking's like $30. So yeah, so we did a lot of walking. It was good.
Can we avoid the topic any longer? Probably
It's
not.
a great segue
It's
into
a great
this.
hard left.
Here we go. Revelation. Yeah, that's about all we know. So,
See you next week.
well, let's remind folks that we are looking. Hold on, I just got a text. Oh, yeah, that's correct. Can we delay more?
No.
This is the chicken we're eating for lunch, so I need to respond to this.
all staff lunch today.
There we go.
People are
Turn it.
flying off of the podcast.
So,
all right.
well,
So
one of the things
We're looking for Jesus.
that's what I was gonna say. So Mandy and I, we were reading this as we were traveling and stuff, and she kept asking me like, "What does this mean? What does this mean?" I'm like, "These are the questions everyone has, right?
Yep.
Let's not get lost in
Mhm.
these fine details because Jesus is trying to communicate to us about who he is, his kingdom, who we are as his people. Let's keep that." And I reminded her what Shane Woods had reminded us. Go back to Revelation 1
Mhm.
and remember Jesus is the central figure of this. He is the gospel is at the core of everything, even in all this imagery and what's going on.
Yeah.
Jesus is the message.
This is really a dangerous spot in Revelation because it can easily go off the rails and you almost split the book in half. Like, okay, this was meant for those churches, but now this is the key to interpreting current events. And so in this week's sermon, talked about the fact that we have to still remember this is a real letter to real people facing real circumstances, just like chapter 1 through 5 were. And so, yeah, this is still meant to be an encouragement, and it's still meant to be relevant to them.
So it made sense to the people of Laodicea, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Ephesus, the 7 host congregations of chapters 2 and 3. It made sense to them because it's first for them. It's images that they would have easily understood, whereas we struggle with it. How many of you like poetry? Yeah.
Big negative.
Pass.
Big negative. We are not in our mind able to just naturally interpret this. That's why I say Shane said the artist is the best one to understand Revelation. I think it's true. These images, these pictures are meant to communicate a real message to real people.
Yeah.
And the same has to be
Well,
held
it
for
opens
us.
it opens up a different part of our brain when we begin to. It's the imagination.
Yeah.
It's yeah. And go ahead, sorry.
Well, here's the other part of this too. This is where it starts playing back into Old Testament pictures.
Yeah.
A ton.
And so, especially in the Western church, we're not usually real good with our Old Testament because we're like, Jesus is not in the Old Testament, but
not
he's
written in
actually
red.
he's all over, right? And so, I teach Old Testament survey for part of our DTI class here, and it's crazy when you take those students through that course and you start looking for Jesus in the Old Testament and all these patterns and all these imageries, and all of a sudden when you come to Revelation, it's like there's a lot of Old Testament grounding here that's playing back into the Jewish mindset. So when they're talking about these imageries and patterns and all these different things, numbers, there's a lot of Jewish influence here that plays back into the Old Testament as well.
So my Tuesday lunch group discussed, and we were reflecting on this weekend's worship past weekend when we had the 144,000 of chapter 7, which I just skipped right over in the sermon because I didn't want to spend the time going into the detail of that. But that's kind of what we do here. Like that meant 144,000, my interpretation. Let's go with that. My interpretation. 12 times 12 is 144. Well, what's the significance of 12 in a Jewish mind? Well, that's 3 times 4. 3 is a number for God. 4 is a number for all the earth. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles in the New Testament. That's all on purpose. Those numbers have meaning. So it's all of God's people is what we're being represented there. 1,000 is the number that they use for a large and complete group. God owned a cattle on 1,000 hills. The psalmist tells us. So does that mean he only owns a cattle on 1,000 hills, not 1,001?
There's
Well,
some Clay
God had
County
everything.
farmers that got that.
Yeah. No, it means that he owns all the hill and it's a bunch of cows. Or,
All the cows.
all the cows on a bunch of hills.
Yeah.
Right? And so that number 144, becomes this fight over am I in or not in, which is a good question, but it's not because of that number. That number means all of God's people. So those are the kind of things you look at this text and you say, okay, you can do that. You can analyze those details, but you better be careful when you do that to keep it in the flow of Jewish thought, Old Testament understanding, and it's got to be pointing you to Jesus always and how we can better worship him.
And we've been talking about this the whole time, and I think we have to keep talking about it throughout the whole series, but it's looking at this through the lens of the context. And too many times we try to divorce the context from the text. We try to take chapters 1 through 3 out of the rest of the chapters, and we try to insert 2021 America and what we're seeing on the news. And that, and I think Jeff said it in the first week, that the text can't mean anything to us that it didn't mean to them. And when you begin to understand that, I think it helps you see it a little clearer.
Things like we were asked this past week is the this is
You're gonna ask it right here, right now.
Is the COVID vaccine the mark of the beast? Well, what in the world would that have meant to people of Laodicea?
Yeah.
Nothing, right? So it can't be a literal understanding of that truth. Is there marks of this world that identify us as participating in this world and separating us from Christ? Yeah, lots of things. And historically, but it had to make sense to those people in that first understanding.
Yeah. Or
so
who's the Antichrist?
Yeah,
Right.
as if there's only one.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
There have been antichrists I heard a funny one this week too. Was it Donald Trump? And then somebody said, no, he's one of witnesses.
Oh boy.
Oh,
So,
geez.
it depends on your interpretation of it, right?
Depends, I guess, if you're like Republican or Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to a citizen in the Roman Empire trying to be a Jesus follower,
They're like, Donald who?
they didn't care about Donald Trump, right? Didn't know. So, yeah,
Yep.
it's Domitian. Anyway, that's deep.
Yeah. So I think
See why we don't talk about this on Sunday.
Well, I think in order
Oh, I'm going to.
set the stage for where this section is going, you have to start in chapter 12 because, again, you're not reading a chronological order of things. You're seeing different windows into what John sees. And so when you look at chapter 12, you see this battle between the dragon, and it starts off with a woman. And it's this... What it's trying to convey to us is that there is a cosmic reality that is playing out at the same time. And so what we see here is not everything. And so
Like the Matrix.
Yes.
pill or the blue pill.
Exactly the same thing. But in chapter 12, it's laying out this retelling of the Christmas story from a cosmic perspective. You see that the dragon is looking to devour the child. Well, okay, that's Satan and Jesus. We know in the story it's playing out with Herod trying to kill all of the boys and all that. So what you're seeing and what's trying to be conveyed is that there is more to this battle than what you see raging in front of you. But for the believer, that physical and cosmic battle is no less real. And I think that's what it's trying to stir us to as believers in 2021 America, is that the spiritual warfare, the spiritual battle is still raging. That is a physical reality for you today, just as much as it was there. But I love how it opens and ends that section because it starts with the end and victory and worship, and it ends with celebration, victory, and worship. And so, the outcome is already, there's no doubt. And then you get to see a revealing of who both sides are. And I love how this all comes together. So you don't necessarily have to look at it from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's just this all one picture of the battle and the victory and which side are you going to choose.
So one of the things that Levi and I have been working through, and he put in the Revelation workbook, is this...
Which grab that, by the way, because that is
yeah,
phenomenal.
If you don't have a Revelation workbook, you need one.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of triumphal procession, where a government, specifically Roman government, would capture the most prized warriors and the king of whatever. The battle had already been done. Victory had already been won. But what they would do is they would take them captive, and they would make them replay the battle scenes, for the people to see.
So all these places that we went to had giant theaters. That's entertainment in that sense was key to their culture.
Yeah. And so they would march these prisoners and the king of the conquered, nation or whatever out there, make them replay this for all the people to see before them, even though the victory had already been won.
And kill them.
And then they would kill them.
Yeah.
But sometimes they would make them replay this multiple times. So they would hold them captive for sometimes years and make them replay this on an annual type stage. Wow. You know what I'm saying? To remember the victory that had been won
Such a
on their behalf.
powerful image. That's what Jesus is communicating for us. We have victory in him. It's secure. This battle keeps raging, and there's this perpetual struggle but it's won. It's beautiful.
Well, really, I think it comes, and Ben, you said this in your message, but it comes down to this battle is playing out, and it really is ultimately, where is your allegiance? Where is your worship?
Yep.
And he used a phrase that Shane uses in his curriculum. I forget what it is exactly.
Yeah, he said, "Who you worship, you become," and that's you're going to see the fates of both sides in this section, and so you're going to see, hey, depending on which God you choose, and this could be, basically God or anything other than him. If you choose one or the other, you're going to see how that's going to end up for you. And it's again, it uses the imagery, and so it stirs something inside of you either way. So
So this would be a good point to remind people. We interpretively, you've mentioned a replay of the battle over and over again. You've mentioned in this section, this is the pattern. What we see in Revelation is, and I best understand this from William Hendrickson, a little commentary, More Than Conquerors, about 1940, old text, but he lays out this repeated cycles where Jesus is walking us through this battle of history, this whole story, and he almost gets to the conclusion, and then he gets a little more detail, and he retells the story. Mm-hmm. So we have this whole battle, like from the birth of Jesus all the way to the destruction of the enemy, right? Yeah. And that plays out in this section, but that also played out in chapter 6 with the seals, which we explained being the unfolding of the plan of God to redeem and restore everything that was destroyed by sin. So the opening of the seals led us through this whole pattern of history. Now, the trumpets do the same thing. The bowls do the same thing. And then Andrew and I are going to do chapter 20, 21, 22 at the end. It's the same story over and over again. We're repeating the story with different detail from a different vantage point using different imagery, but it's the same message each time. The battle has been won.
Well, that's what we see from chapter 12 to chapter 13. We are introduced to how the enemy uses the beasts that come out of the sea and out of the earth to distract us and to tempt us.
Yep.
And we're able to see that cycle happening again and again.
Yep.
So
a fun little parallel, and I'm going to give away a little bit of my chapter 22 here teaching, but there's parallels, 4 Gospels, right? And so you look at like the revealing of the perspectives, right? The 4 Gospels reveal the perspective of Jesus through different lenses. The battle has been won, right? Then you look at the Beatitudes, the way we ought to live in light of what God says in Matthew. And then you have the Beatitudes, 7, actually, in Revelation. Blessed are those, And so there's this pattern of even starting with Christ from the Gospel accounts to the ending of Revelation of the battle has been won, Jesus is to be glorified, and there's a way we ought to live in light of what God has called us to.
There's so many layers in here like that. Like we repeated that phrase over and over again last week. Power and glory and honor, praise, and there was 7 words. They're singing to Jesus. Well, what's the 7 about? That's completion. His holiness is complete. You find 4 phrases to describe the destruction. Why? Because all the earth, the destruction, anything apart from Christ completely separated is destroyed. Those layers are just...
They're all over.
You could dig in this. You could dig in this forever.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we're taking 2 weeks to get from chapters 7 to 21, and it's like, that's 25 sermons.
Yeah, it's either 2 weeks or 25 sermons.
Yeah.
You had to go one or the other.
Yep.
Well, I mean, Shane did do his PhD on like the Book of Revelation.
Yeah, like one line.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
well,
and
I don't even understand most of what he wrote. So
yeah,
but I think seeing it, like you said, and unpacking those layers, I think it allows us to be reminded about the purpose of this.
Yeah,
and I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mentioned that there's threefold element there. I think there's encouragement to encounter the struggle and stand strong. There's conviction when you're compromising, and then there's motivation when you're just kind of becoming apathetic. Yeah, that's all there.
Which is the same message to the churches in Laodicea and Ephesus. All those churches are getting the same message. Now it's just you're seeing more revealing of that because, so Jesus tells them, hold on to me, hold fast to me. Okay, well here's why. Chapter 11 is going to show you how that ends up. He calls Laodicea, he calls Sardis, he calls all of these others to repent. Well, here's why. Because if you don't, chapter 9 is going to show you the outcome. So again, it comes back to this idea that this is one continuing letter. They didn't shut the book after chapter 5 and be like, well, this is all that's relevant for us. But there's a moment in chapter 10, and it's so interesting how this is laid out because you really can jump around and see this whole story pieced together. But there's a section, and I didn't even really have time to talk about it in my message, but there's a section in chapter 10 where it's talking about the angel and the little scroll, and he's instructed to eat it, which Ezekiel chapter 3 they get the same imagery from there. But it tastes sweet, but yet it turns his stomach sour. And so that's in the middle of these two sides. And what it's trying to communicate is that grace and the gospel is sweet to those who have experienced it. The forgiveness of Christ, that is sweet to those who accept that, who have received that. But to those who are away from God, that message comes across as judgmental. That message is not good news. It is something to revile. It's something to cast out. And so that's kind of the center of this message, is like, the gospel is good news. This is where victory comes from. But then you've got that choice to make, and you're going to see how both of those turn out.
So you dug into all these images as you worked through these chapters. What maybe was your favorite?
I mean, I have a different perspective. So chapter 11 obviously is my favorite because of the victory element of it. But I think the element that I got most excited to teach, if this makes sense, is chapter 9, because that is the message of wake up. Like, this is the warning, and it's so true to our culture today, because in the fifth trumpet, so the beginning of chapter 9, there's a star that's been referenced earlier on and later in chapter 8, but before this, that has fallen. It's given the key to the abyss. Jesus has already said in chapter 1, verse 18, that I hold the keys of death and Hades. So it's not as though Jesus has lost control, but he has allowed this temporary authority for hell to be opened up by this agent of evil, if you will. And what you find is that the people who have followed God, they're protected from this. But the ones who have chosen to go away from God, they're the ones who are suffering. And it's not, because I think the question in especially our culture's mind is, how could God do this? But that's not the right question. They are getting exactly what they've asked for. They're getting the benefit, if so to speak, of the God that they've chosen to worship. The God they've chosen to worship is one of death and destruction. And so the result of that is you're going to experience death and destruction, because that's all that death knows. And so I think it's interesting in the middle of chapter 9, it says that the agony they suffer was like that of the sting of a scorpion, which is like one that just doesn't go away. But verse 6, it says, during those days people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. And Shane puts it great. It's one of those I wish I would have thought of. But he's like, death does, in times of trouble, death does the only thing it knows how to do, abandon you. And so there's this false promise from Satan, the dragon, evil, whatever you want to call it. But there's this false hope of, this will lead you to life. This is going to lead to comfort. This is where you're going to find peace and success, because Satan masquerades as an angel of light. He's not coming out to say, this is what you're going to lead to death. This is going to lead to destruction. No, he tries to lull you to sleep with this idea of, this is actually going to bring you security. But what you find is that in those moments of trouble, you don't find peace, comfort, security. You find death, because that's all it has to offer.
Sin always promises more than it can deliver.
Yep, absolutely.
The thing is that in all reality, like, he is really good at it.
Yep.
Because he's able to do it in a way where we don't even recognize it.
Yep.
And before you know it, your life can be spinning off the rails.
Yep. We long for a God that is near, that is close to us, that we think is going to bring us peace, comfort, all these different things. And I can't remember where it was. I think it's chapter 11. Anyways, he says that he gives these people an opportunity to repent. So this trumpet's open. This pain is inflicted upon these people. They can't die. And there's still a moment of grace in there, because it says that they didn't repent, meaning that was still the opportunity that they had, was to turn from that, but they chose to cling to these gods. I think it's verse 20. Yeah. And it says, but they did not stop worshiping demons and idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood. Idols that cannot see or hear or walk. And you think about what Jesus has said to the churches, the 7 churches in Asia Minor, that he sees their deeds, he hears their prayers, and he's walking among them. And it's this idea that Jesus is intimate with them. He's near. He's present. And what he's saying is, these idols, actually anything other than him, is not.
That's very like reminiscent of the Egyptian Exodus as well.
Yeah.
They're afflicted with boils.
Yep.
And even death, like, and they still cling. That Pharaoh allows them to go, but then he pursues them because he's clinging to false gods.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think on a lighter note, I think Satan is in charge of doing hotel reviews and pictures, because about every hotel I've ever seen over promises and under delivers on their. The pictures look great.
Except for the Charisma Deluxe.
The Charisma Deluxe that was
yeah.
all
I
right.
mean, that
but
was a great one.
I'm just saying, those Expedia pictures look way better than most places.
That's
end up.
everything in this world.
Yep.
Overpromise and underdeliver.
Yep.
Only Jesus gives you more than you could ever ask for. I think that's a good way to shut this one down.
Before we get in too much trouble.
We're already there. I think we're already there. But hey, thanks for joining us on the ReThink podcast.